Hey, it's Alicia from mobilitymastery.com, and today I want to talk about how you learned about pain in childhood, because whatever you learned, whether you were taught or it became a self-taught learning based on what you experienced in your childhood, whatever that was for you is definitely going to show up in your body and in your relationships as an adult. So it's worthwhile to make this conscious so that you can actually have freedom over the domain of your body and your life and your relationships, and not act out of kind of that automated programmed behavior from a time when you were too little and too young to make the decisions that you can absolutely make and change now as an adult. And a lot of us don't really examine this, and we take for granted how our body is communicating to us and whatever's happening in our body. And the truth is, whatever is happening in your body is likely going to trigger something from your childhood in response or reactivity to it. So that's what I want to talk about today. And when I say pain, I am actually referring to all pain. So emotional pain, and in the form of feelings that feel painful, like anger or hurt, sadness, heartbreak, grief, frustration, right? To physical pain as well. So for me, they're interconnected. When I say pain, I mean both. And our experiences as children in relation to physical pain and emotional pain definitely shaped how we engage with it as adults, and we can change it. So there are many ways this can manifest, and it's multi-layered, and sometimes it goes back to like seemingly small events in your childhood that had a big internal impact on you. So I worded this in a way strategically here. What did you learn about pain? Because it's not necessarily the same thing you were taught. An adult may have said something to you and actually meant it in a completely different way than you took it on. So it's what you do with those experiences that really matters here. So for example, in my family, growing up, physical pain was really scary. Like, it was definitely to be avoided in numerous ways. Neither of my parents exercised, worked out, engaged in strength training or physical activity. And so there was very, very little injury, though I do remember my mom telling me, her knees would hurt when she would hike. And even though she wasn't hiking anymore, I don't know why, like, that stuck with me. So it's interesting that the only pain I ever ended up experiencing as a growing adult, starting when I was 17 and then into my 20s, was knee pain. Really interesting, right? So there was actually like an avoidance of anything that would cause physical injury in my family. And so I definitely think that has impacted me as well. It became a strategy for me to avoid engaging in activities that would aggravate or further, make it possible for me to experience a physical injury in my 20s. I'm not really that way anymore. And then on the emotional side of things, man, where do I start? There was so much turmoil in my household, a lot of emotionality, a lot of outbursts, a lot of conflict that wasn't very healthy looking back on it. So a lot of anger, a lot of upset without modeling resolution. So I got to see the fights, but I never got to see the resolution. And typically what I saw, and then also began to experience as I got older and started having my own emotions that I would want to express, is sadness, tears, anger, frustration, being critical of anyone in my household. Anything resembling any of those was not welcome, typically by my father. And I learned in numerous ways to avoid that, really, I guess. It never really stuck with me, though it impacted me for sure. I came into this life, I guess, with like this, tenacious determination to be me and to feel what I feel. And so it took a lot, actually, to kind of push me into myself for a little while, which I did do to maintain connection. But for example, I remember many, many times as a teenager that I would be crying in front of my father and he would laugh at me. So what I know now, looking back on it, is I was making him uncomfortable. My sadness made him uncomfortable, and his coping mechanism was laughter. At the time, though, it felt like that laughter was directed at me, that my crying, my sadness was a laughing matter, and that hurt. So I learned not to really speak up, especially to men. So it was a different story with women and based on my relationship with my mother. I also remember, interestingly, there's one other thread here that has had a powerful impact on my life. I remember when I was, I don't know, probably 6 or 7, I had a high fever. I actually had whooping cough. I had a high fever. And I remember my mom telling me, don't be afraid of this fever. Your body is doing what it needs to do right now to make you healthy. And by allowing this fever to do what it's doing, you are going to cultivate antibodies and you probably won't get sick for like 10 years. And I trusted her at that time, right? And that was a really powerful experience for me and has shaped a lot of the way I deal with bodily sensations and uncomfortable experiences like a cold or a flu or a fever. And my mom was right, by the way, guys. I rarely get sick, and I've had like a couple of other experiences like that where I get really sick and I have a high fever and I let it do its thing, and then I like don't get sick for, I don't know, another 10 years like that. So there are many things that we learn, you know, good for good and bad. So hopefully it wasn't 100%, you know, kind of like on the negative side of things in your family. But I want to talk about other ways that we learn, you know, lessons about pain and how to be with it or not be with it. How our parents respond to physical pain itself, you know, aside from the emotional, is also really powerful. I didn't have very many experiences with it because as I said, my parents were not very active, so there wasn't a lot of opportunity to experience physical pain. And so that in itself, though, I still think is really interesting for me to look at in my life. Stefan, however, my fiance, was very active in sports, played tennis, played football, played other basketball, and he did get injured, and so did his brother many times. And what happened in his childhood is a lot of minimizing of the physical injuries. So he learned to endure physical pain, that basically, like, you know, whatever he was feeling wasn't worth being acknowledged or having something done about it. And I think that is a really common one in a lot of households. Like, you know, if you scrape your knee or you fall down on your bicycle or you fall out of a tree, you know, one of two main things I think is going to happen in most situations, unless your parents are extremely conscious individuals. Your pain, your physical injury, is going to be experienced as scary by your parents. Maybe more by your mom than your dad. I don't know. I'm not trying to be totally sexist here, but that was my experience. You know, we're like, oh my God, oh no, are you okay? Right? And you learn in that moment, oh no, physical pain is scary, right? Or it's minimized or invalidated. And that usually ends up in you learning an internal lesson that physical pain is to be endured. You know, you just have to suffer in silence, and carry it, endure it. And then as far as emotions go, you know, I just put this bullet point here: emotions are okay, ... until they aren't, because I think it's probably a rare family that doesn't allow any emotion, right? So typically some is kind of like tolerated, if not welcomed. And there's a cap on it, right? Like, you know, if you throw a tantrum as a kid, you might get time out, you might, you know, be punished in some way. As you grow older and you really are starting to become an individual, right, as a teenager, and you're trying on, testing authority and that kind of thing, you might find out, as I did, that, it's okay to kind of laugh or cry about certain things, but if it gets too big, too loud, or it's directed at, a parent or a sibling, or I don't know what your experience was. For me, it was if it was directed at my father, that it didn't go well. So like emotion is okay until it's not. So we learn that there's a limit to what we are allowed to feel and express before we have to push it back inside or experience being punished for what we're feeling and expressing. So of course, as I said earlier, there are many ways that this can show up. It's very nuanced. So I'm curious to have you think about this in relationship to your own childhood and the lessons you learned. What did you learn about physical pain? And I want you to think about this from the perspective of the meaning you gave to the experiences you had, rather than the lessons taught to you, though there's going to be some overlap, right? So how we learned to kind of internalize those experiences led to those lessons we learned, the meaning we gave to it, and started to automate our behavior in childhood. And then we often will carry this behavior into our adulthood, including, how our body is now getting our attention in our adult life, as well as the pain in our relationships. So I'm not going to go super deep on a couple of these bullet points I wrote here, but I really wanted to bring them into the conversation because I feel like they're important to consider. Because there's absolutely something we can do about this, but first we have to identify where those patterns for us of learned behavior regarding pain, kind of where they're manifesting. And then we can go about, rewiring ourselves or creating new behaviors around pain of all kinds. So most of the time, or maybe probably 100% of the time, our response to what is happening, when I am crying in front of my dad and he's laughing at me, the lesson that I learned is that if I show sadness or hurt to men, because I absolutely carried this over to other people than just my dad, I'm likely to get laughed at or made fun of or shamed in some way or yelled at, because it was either laughter or yelling at me. And so I rarely do that. I'm still, at 39 years old, learning to do that with the men in my life, to actually bring my hurt to them and create a safe place for that to be embraced and welcomed and a part of the relationship, and how we heal together and evolve together. But for a long time, it was an automated behavior that I didn't even really think about. I just would not speak up and not even think about it. And it has to do with safety and survival, right? In order to maintain connection, in order to stay, a part of this family unit when I was little, right? And to get the food and the shelter that I needed to survive, I learned to stop doing that as much. And then eventually just stopped altogether, and then had to pick it back up for myself as a conscious, invitation to myself that what I feel is okay, that, I can bring my hurt to other people. And then our self-talk, I think, is often a reflection of how people talked to us. And this is kind of a scary concept to consider. It's something Stefan and I have talked about a lot, because we often will end up in a self-talk that has a tone and a language very much like whoever hurt us the most verbally as a child. And I don't mean abuse. I just mean, if our pain was minimized, then we start to engage in self-talk where we minimize our own pain. So we take on the voices of the people in our lives when we were too little to do that consciously, and then it becomes our self-talk in adulthood. So if you ever find yourself minimizing physical or emotional pain, or you notice that you're avoiding the pain of life, whether it's emotional or physical, right? Like maybe you avoid physical activity in order to, like minimize your chances of even experiencing physical pain, or maybe you don't allow yourself to feel much emotion in your relationships in order to avoid or minimize your chances that there will be an upset, right? So this is how we carry over these patterns into our adult lives. And it very much, in my opinion, shows up in our bodies and how we are able to be with physical pain and the sensations that arise through our bodies. I put conflict here in kind of like a self-talk slash conflict, because how we engage in our relationships has a direct impact on how we engage with the relationship we have with our body. And I did film another video on how we do conflict is how we do healing. So if that interests you, then I encourage you to watch that one. We'll link to it below this video. But if this kind of topic really interests you, I think that would be another video that would be great for you to watch. And again, I'm not going to go into it right now, but how we do conflict, or if we really avoid conflict, then it's probably going to show up in our body as well. And it's something to just make conscious so that you have freedom over it. There is no right or wrong. It's just about making it conscious. And then I put nervous system patterns here because these automated behaviors and ways of engaging with pain of all kind become an automated nervous system pattern. So I'm going to be diving into nervous system patterns more on this channel. I plan on doing a whole series on them in 2020, so watch out for that. So if that interests you, then stay tuned to this channel and definitely subscribe, because I've got a lot more coming on that. It's something that is a real passion of mine, and I like to shine a light on it, because it's my opinion that these patterns and behaviors are largely a physiological impulse first, not a mind or ego pattern, which I hear a lot of people talking about, like, oh, it's your ego or your mind that created these patterns in childhood. No, it wasn't. You didn't have an ego yet. It was in development. And because you didn't have a conscious mind, a conscious ego yet, your body took care of you, for you. Your body actually enacted impulses and made meaning out of things in order for you to survive, right? And reach adulthood instead of potentially, not reaching adulthood. And so it's largely a body up process. And I'm really passionate about teaching you that. So that's why the title of this video is What You Learn About Pain in Childhood Shows Up in Your Body and Your Relationships as an Adult. So I encourage you to look at how you are with physical sensations that you might label pain that are showing up in your body. And it could be anything from an actual injury to digestive issues or anxiety, or shallow breathing, or any number of things, stiffness even, right? There's a whole range here. It doesn't, when I say pain, it doesn't have to mean acute injury, bent in half, can't stand up, stabbing pain somewhere. Though, if that's your orientation and definition, orientation to or definition of pain, that for you to label something painful, it must be really bad. You probably learned that in childhood, and that's worth considering as well, because there's a whole symphony of sensation that you have available to you to feel in the uncomfortable and pleasurable realm. And a lot of us get signals to actually take care of something preemptively with minor discomfort that we feel, like minorly uncomfortable sensations in our body. And if we actually can tune in and listen to those and do something about it, we avoid catastrophe, we avoid the big injury or big pain on a physical level, and I would say also emotionally. If you can tune in to the nuance of minorly uncomfortable emotional reactions in your life and tend to them as they arise, then you process your life as it's actually happening and you avoid big emotional upsets. And I'm not trying to say big emotional upsets are bad or a sign of, anything you should be scared of. That's, perfectly normal as well. So, I would love if you are brave enough to share into this video. I really want to cultivate more community around this and we learn from each other. So it's one thing to have me standing up here talking to you and sharing my stories and how I relate to this, but the more we all share, because we're unique and because we have a unique relationship to, you know, those childhood lessons we learned, and to physical pain and to emotional pain and to conflict and relationships and safety and survival versus thriving, all of that, the more we can share, the more we learn from each other, and the more we feel less alone, and the more we can celebrate the diversity, you know, that's here in how we all deal with pain, because it's unique to us. So the purpose of this is to shine the light of consciousness on how you are orienting to pain in your life, so that you can consciously engage with it in a way that is a free choice as a free adult, with your own ability to change the meaning, to change your orientation to pain, to change those learned behaviors into empowering ones, and to engage with pain in a way that feels good to you. So that might look very different from the way I do it. I would say, however, that universally, it's probably a good idea to turn towards it and welcome pain as a messenger that there's, you know, something wants to come through you, either to be processed and digested or metabolized, or to evolve you, or to teach you something. And if you allow pain to do that, you gain superpowers. You learn about your body and it stops feeling scary. You learn about psychology, yours and other humans, and that stops feeling scary. You learn how to do conflict. You learn how to do relationship. You learn how to inhabit your body in a way that feels really empowering, really conscious, and really free. So I encourage you to embrace this path, as uncomfortable as it might be at times. So I hope this was useful to you. If you currently have anything in your body, in your physicality that feels painful or uncomfortable in any way, then I encourage you to use that as an opportunity to learn about how you orient to pain, and see if you can change it a little bit, turn the dial one way or the other a little bit, open a different door than you're used to opening. For example, if you're used to, you know, avoiding or minimizing pain or enduring pain, then try welcoming it. Maybe, you know, if you're used to avoiding it or minimizing it, perhaps it might be useful to even dramatize it. And I'm not saying because I want you to be a drama queen around pain or drama king, but because actually in your dramatization of it, you might find that you've actually embodied it 80% of its full potential, because you're so used to minimizing it. And if you continue to allow yourself to dramatize it, you'll find 100%. And you may not need to dramatize it anymore. But sometimes we're so used to avoiding and minimizing or enduring that we don't even know what it feels like or looks like or sounds like to fully embody our experience of emotions and sensations. You know, if you're used to avoiding it, turn towards it. If you're used to enduring it, try, you know, to find a way out, right? Instead of carrying it and thinking you have to suffer in silence, share it with somebody. I don't know exactly what that's going to look like for you. It is personal, it's unique to us, but you know. I'll just end this by saying, if you're willing to turn towards yourself in this moment, you know, there's a knowingness in you of how you're currently orienting to pain and what you could do right now that would shift things for you to have a different experience in your body and in your relationships. You know, there is wisdom in you, and maybe no one has told you that before or given you permission to turn towards it. So if that's true, then this is your permission slip and your encouragement to do that, because I truly believe that you have wisdom in you to know what to do and how to be with your body, and how to be with, you know, your emotions in relationship to other humans. So I encourage you to cultivate that wisdom by turning towards yourself, listening to the messages there, and then take action and embrace the mess that comes, because it's not always a straight path. So thank you so much for watching. Please share your thoughts below this video, and I'll see you next time.